A decorated Army officer, attacked in his own uniform by the people sworn to protect him. Phones are recording, the crowd is watching, and the world is about to see the truth unfold. How far would you go to survive when power and hate collide, while the world watches? This is the night one man stood tall and refused to be silenced. The night was calm, the kind of Virginia night where the air feels heavy but still. Lieutenant Marcus Ellison had just finished a long day at the base. He was proud of the uniform he wore, proud of the country he served, and proud of the new SUV he had recently bought. It was his first real splurge since becoming an officer, and tonight, driving home in it, he felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. Every detail of the evening reminded him of how far he had come. The son of a school teacher and a postal worker, Marcus had worked relentlessly to build a life defined by discipline and respect. His family called him the proof that hard work paid off. His uniform wasn't just clothing. It was sacrifice, commitment, and dignity stitched into fabric. Then, without warning, red and blue lights exploded in his rearview mirror. His heart dropped. The patrol car behind him clung close, its signal sharp and commanding. Marcus frowned, glancing quickly at his speed. Normal. His tags, up to date. He hadn't swerved, hadn't broken a law. Still, the cruiser stayed locked on him. The siren whooped once, then cut off, as if daring him to ignore it. Marcus's chest tightened. He knew this feeling all too well. He remembered every talk from his father, every warning from his grandmother. If you're stopped, be careful. Don't argue. Don't give them an excuse. He turned on his signal, slowing, but around him was only darkness. Trees, empty road, no witnesses. His gut whispered a truth he couldn't ignore. Not here. Not in the dark. Then he saw it, a gas station up ahead, washed in bright white light. A public place, cameras, people, safety. Marcus made his decision. He would stop there. Behind him, the cruiser's siren blared again, sharper this time, almost angry. His grip on the wheel tightened. He whispered to himself, a mantra of survival. Stay calm, Marcus. Just stay calm. He pulled into the station, rolling to a steady stop beside the pumps. He flipped on his hazard lights, each blink echoing like a warning. And in that moment of stillness, he thought, maybe it would be simple. Maybe they'd see who he was. Maybe this would all end quietly. But deep down, Marcus knew. The night had just begun. Inside the patrol car, the mood was already poisoned. Officer Randall Keene leaned forward, his jaw set tight, eyes fixed on Marcus's SUV. He saw the lights and kept going, Keene muttered to his partner. That's not a mistake, that's defiance. Beside him, Officer Doyle adjusted his vest, his tone colder than the night air. Yeah, he's stalling, probably hiding something. People who don't pull over right away, they're trouble. In their minds, the story had already been written. Marcus wasn't cautious. He was guilty. He wasn't being careful. He was being deceptive. His decision to stop in the safety of light had been twisted into resistance. Keene clicked his radio and called in for backup. His voice was calm, rehearsed, the kind that turned assumptions into facts before anyone could question them. By the time he stepped out of the cruiser, weapon in hand, he had already decided who Marcus was. The gas station lot glared with artificial brightness, but the two officers brought with them a shadow darker than any night. Keene shouted first, his voice cutting across the empty lot. "Driver, put your hands out the window, now!" Marcus reacted instantly. His hands shot up, steady but trembling, palms open as they slid out past the window frame. The fluorescent light made his skin gleam, made his vulnerability undeniable. "Keep those hands where I can see him," Doyle barked, taking aim. His tone wasn't just commanding. It was hostile, thick with suspicion. Marcus's voice rose in the tense silence, careful, respectful, pleading. "Officers, I drove here because it's well lit. I wanted us all to be safe. That's the only reason." But Keene's lip curled. "Don't tell me how to do my job. You don't get to decide where the stop happens." His pistol glinted under the harsh light as he took another step closer. From the convenience store window, a clerk froze mid-motion, eyes wide. A couple at a nearby pump paused, watching, phones already in hand. The scene was unfolding like theater, each second more dangerous than the last. Marcus didn't move. He couldn't. Every warning he'd ever been given echoed inside him. His grandmother's words came back sharp. "Baby, they'll treat you different. Don't give them an excuse." But the officers weren't looking for excuses. They were building a case in real time. To them, his calmness was defiance. His patience was resistance. His silence was guilt. Keen's voice grew sharper, louder, as if volume itself could make his suspicions true. "Get ready. He's playing us." And Doyle, eyes narrow, kept his gun trained, waiting for Marcus to twitch, to flinch, to move just wrong. The gas station lights burned bright, but for Marcus Ellison, the night was already closing in. Oh, the silence didn't last. Keen moved first, his boots striking hard against the pavement as he closed the distance between himself and Marcus's SUV. His gun stayed leveled, unwavering, the muzzle fixed like a target on Marcus's chest. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked. Doyle shouted almost at the same time. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The commands clashed, sharp and contradictory. One order demanded movement. The other punished it. Marcus froze, his arms stiff through the window, palms out. His voice trembled, but it carried strength too, the steadiness of a man used to keeping calm under pressure. "Officers, I'm afraid to move. I don't understand what I've done. Can you please tell me what this is about?" His words weren't aggressive. They weren't defiant. They were human. But humanity wasn't what Keen saw. "You'll understand when you're on the ground," Keen snapped back, his voice dripping with contempt. The gas station had become an open stage. A woman near the pumps gasped, raising her phone higher, her hands shaking as she recorded. A teenage boy whispered to his father, "Why are they aiming at him? He's in uniform." But the officers didn't hear the whispers, didn't see the cameras. All they saw was a man they had already labeled as a threat. Doyle edged closer, his finger resting dangerously on the trigger. "If you move those hands even an inch, you're done," he hissed. Marcus's chest rose and fell quickly now, though he fought to keep his breathing steady. "I am not resisting. My hands are out. Please, just tell me what's happening." Keen sneered, circling to the side, his stance wide, his eyes locked with Marcus. "What's happening? What's happening is you didn't stop when you should have. You thought you were in control, but you're not. You hear me? You're not." The words hit harder than the gun pointed at him. Because in Marcus's mind, it became crystal clear. This wasn't about a traffic violation. This was about power, about control, about reminding him, even in his uniform, even with the flag stitched to his chest, exactly where they thought he belonged. The contradiction hung heavy in the air. A soldier who served the nation, officers who claimed to protect it, and yet here they stood, on opposite ends of a gun barrel. The gas station lights burned down like a spotlight. The audience held their breath. Marcus, motionless in the driver's seat, weighed every syllable, every blink, every possible move, because he knew one wrong motion and the night wouldn't end with questions. It would end with silence. And Keen, eyes hard and unblinking, looked like he was waiting for exactly that. Marcus knew the danger wasn't just in the guns pointed at him. It was in the eyes behind them, eyes that had already judged him, eyes that weren't looking for truth, only for a reason. He forced himself to steady his breathing, even as his pulse pounded in his ears. He knew panic would only feed them. He knew fear would only make his hands shake, and shaking might be mistaken for reaching. So he clung to calmness like it was a shield. "Officers," he said slowly, clearly, each word deliberate. "I serve this country. I am not armed. I am not a threat. I only drove here for safety." His tone was respectful, but beneath it was something else. Dignity, the kind of dignity that refused to vanish, even with a weapon aimed at his heart. Keen didn't like it. His lip curled. a sneer twisting across his face. You think wearing that uniform makes you special? You think it makes you untouchable? Step out or I'll drag you out. Doyle cut in again, shouting over him, "Keep those hands up. Don't you dare move them." The contradiction was suffocating. One order demanded compliance, the other demanded stillness. Either way, Marcus risked his life. He looked from one officer to the other, his eyes stinging with disbelief. The reality sank deeper with every second. His rank, his service, his sacrifice, it didn't matter. To them, he wasn't a lieutenant. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a black man in a car. From the sidelines, the woman filming whispered shakily, "He's doing everything right. Why won't they listen?" Marcus didn't move, couldn't move. His arms ached from being stretched through the window, but lowering them wasn't an option. Not here. Not now. Inside, fear gnawed at him, but outwardly he remained steady. His calmness wasn't for him, it was for survival. He repeated, quieter this time, as if reminding himself more than them, "I'm afraid to get out. I just want to make it home." The words hung heavy in the night. Keene stepped closer, the barrel of his weapon now frighteningly near. His voice dropped lower, darker. "Then do exactly what I say, or you won't be going home at all." The lot fell silent. Even the woman's phone trembled in her hand. Every eye fixed on Marcus. He stayed still, calm on the outside, though inside he felt the crushing weight of one truth. His survival wasn't in his own hands anymore. The gas station lights seemed to hum louder as the tension thickened, but what came next wasn't just about authority, it was about contempt. Officer Keene's grip on his pistol didn't falter, but his voice shifted. No longer just commanding, now mocking. "You keep this up, son, and you're about to ride the lightning." The words slashed through the night like a blade. Marcus blinked, stunned. He had heard that phrase before. Soldiers used it in combat zones, describing the firing of a taser, or worse, the jolt of an execution. But hearing it now, from an officer of the law aimed at him, was something else entirely. It wasn't about safety. It was a threat, a promise. The insult hung heavy, not just in meaning but in tone. Keene's voice dripped with the kind of venom that had nothing to do with law enforcement and everything to do with disdain. Marcus swallowed hard. His throat burned, his eyes watered, but his voice remained even. "Sir, please, I'm doing everything you asked." Doyle stepped in then, his face twisted with impatience. "Don't play the victim. You should have thought about that before ignoring our lights." Marcus' hands remained frozen outside the window. His shoulders ached, but he dared not move. His mind, though, screamed at the absurdity. Ignored their lights? He had chosen light for protection, for transparency, for survival. Yet somehow, even that was being twisted into guilt. Keene tilted his head, sneering. "What's the matter? Scared? You should be. You people always are when you finally get caught." The words stung. Not because they were true, they weren't, but because Marcus knew exactly what you people meant. It wasn't his uniform they saw, not the golden bars on his collar, not the country he served, not the discipline etched into his every movement. No, to them his skin told the story. They had already written the ending. For the bystanders watching, the reality snapped into focus. A woman near the pumps whispered to her friend, "Did he just say that? He's in uniform." Her voice cracked, a mix of outrage and disbelief. Marcus closed his eyes for a fleeting second, fighting the storm inside him. He couldn't afford to respond in anger. He couldn't afford to let them bait him. Every fiber of training screamed, "Control yourself, stay alive." When he opened his eyes again, he looked straight at Keene, calm, steady, defiant in the only way that was safe. "I am afraid," he admitted, "because right now, I don't know if I'll make it home." The words landed like thunder. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. And then Keene smirked, leaning closer, his finger hovering dangerously near the trigger. "That's the smartest thing you've said all night." The smirk on Keen's face lingered like a shadow, daring Marcus to flinch, to crack, to give them the excuse they wanted. But Marcus refused. He thought of his mother, how she used to tell him as a boy, "The world will see your skin before it sees your soul. But you remember, Marcus, your soul must still shine." That memory steadied him. He adjusted his voice, speaking softly but firmly, the kind of tone he had learned to use with frightened young soldiers on their first deployment. "Officers, I'm asking you, not as a threat, not as a man in uniform, but as a human being. Please, let's bring this down before somebody gets hurt." The words weren't rehearsed. They came from a raw place inside him, a place that simply wanted to live. But instead of easing the moment, they seemed to ignite Keen. His jaw tightened. "Don't lecture me. You think a few words make you better? That uniform doesn't erase what you are." Doyle's voice chimed in, sharp, almost rehearsed. "Stop resisting orders. Step out, now." Resisting? The absurdity of it all weighed heavy on Marcus's chest. He hadn't moved an inch. His entire body was a statue, his arms outstretched in aching surrender. And still, they painted him as the aggressor. From the sidelines, a bystander finally raised her voice. "He's not resisting. He's doing exactly what you told him." The camera phone in her hands shook, but her voice was steady, righteous. For the first time, Marcus felt a flicker of something besides fear, validation. Someone else saw. Someone else understood. But Keen turned his rage toward the crowd. "Stay back, or you'll all be in cuffs tonight." His tone was laced with the same disdain he showed Marcus. It wasn't about law, it was about power, and Marcus felt the truth settle deep. This wasn't just about him, it was about a system that thrived on intimidation, on rewriting reality to suit its own story. He drew in a breath. "I'm Lieutenant Marcus Ellison. I serve this country. I swore an oath to protect it. And right now, I'm the one who needs protection." The words were powerful, almost poetic, and they hung in the air long after he spoke them. Some of the bystanders nodded, their whispers swelling into quiet outrage. They weren't just watching a man being stopped by police anymore. They were watching a man stripped of dignity, a man fighting to remind the world of his humanity. But Keen only laughed, a cruel, hollow sound. "A soldier begging? What happened to all that bravery?" Marcus didn't answer. Because bravery, he knew, wasn't about bullets or battlefields. Bravery was this moment, keeping calm when the world pressed a gun to your chest and called you less than a man. And bravery, he realized, was the only weapon he had left. The air was charged now, no longer just tense but electric, as if the entire night was holding its breath. Keen lowered his voice to a growl, his pistol unwavering. "Final warning, out of the car. Now." Marcus' heart pounded. He had seen this kind of escalation before, overseas, in hostile villages where one wrong move could spark a firefight. But this wasn't a war zone. This was America. This was home. And yet here he was, calculating every breath like his life depended on it. "I will step out," Marcus said slowly, his voice firm but trembling at the edges. "But I need you to lower your weapons. I don't want to die tonight." It was a plea wrapped in courage, but Keen heard only defiance. His face twisted, and he slammed his free hand against the hood of the SUV. The sharp bang echoed through the lot, making the bystanders flinch. "Don't you tell me what to do," Keen barked. "You're not in charge here. I am." Doyle joined in, his voice shrill with impatience. "Get out, or we'll drag you out ourselves." The contradiction of power was suffocating. Two armed men screaming conflicting commands, both ready to pounce on any movement. Marcus's mind spun. If he moved too fast, he was a threat. If he moved too slow, he was resisting. If he didn't move at all, he was disobeying. For a moment, the silence between their shouts was filled only with the sound of Marcus's own heartbeat. Then quietly but clearly he repeated, "I am afraid to move." The bystanders couldn't hold back anymore. One man shouted, "He's not resisting. He's telling you he's scared." Another woman added, "This is wrong. He's in the military! The voices grew louder, a ripple of outrage spreading across the lot. Phones were raised higher, cameras capturing every second. And Marcus realized something profound. This wasn't just his moment anymore. It was theirs too. Every recording, every witness, every whisper of protest was proof that the truth couldn't be buried. But Keene didn't care. He raised his gun a fraction higher, his finger tightening on the trigger. His face was flushed, consumed by something darker than duty. This ends now. Doyle moved closer to the driver's side, hand reaching for the door handle. The crowd gasped. Marcus's body stiffened, every muscle screaming to flee, but his discipline held him in place. He didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't dare. His survival depended on one thing: control. Inside, though, a storm raged. Is this it? After all the battles I fought? All the sacrifices I made? Does it end here, at a gas station, because of the color of my skin? The thought sliced through him, raw and unforgiving. And then in the silence before Doyle yanked the door, Marcus whispered to himself, barely audible, but powerful enough to echo in his soul. Stay calm, stay alive. The crowd's murmurs rose into a chorus, some pleading, some angry, some trembling with disbelief. The air smelled of gasoline and fear, the neon glow flickering across faces tense with anticipation. Marcus sat frozen, hands stretched out, voice steady but eyes wide. Every second felt like the sharp edge of a blade against his skin. Doyle's hand tightened on the door handle. He yanked. The heavy clank of the latch echoed like a gunshot. The door creaked open, and for a split second, Marcus saw the whites of Doyle's eyes, nervous, jittery, unstable. Keene barked over him, "Get him out, now!" His voice cracked like thunder. Marcus reacted instinctively, not with aggression, but with desperation. "Wait, please, let me undo my seatbelt first. I don't want you thinking I'm reaching for anything." His words carried across the lot, slicing through the chaos. The bystanders leaned in, their phones steady, documenting every second. But Keene's fury only grew. He thrust his weapon closer, the barrel inches from Marcus's chest. His voice, venomous and sharp, spilled out in front of everyone. "Don't you get it? Nobody cares about your fear. Nobody cares about your damn uniform. All I see is another black man who doesn't know his place." The words hit like a slap across the night. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Someone cursed under their breath. Another whispered, "He really said that out loud." Marcus's heart sank, but not from shock. He had always known this truth existed, festering under the surface. What broke him wasn't hearing it. It was hearing it declared openly, boldly, with a gun pressed against him. His voice wavered, but he forced the words out anyway. "Sir, my place is serving this country. My place is protecting the very freedoms you wear that badge for." For the first time, Doyle hesitated. His hand on the door loosened just slightly, his eyes flicking between Marcus and the crowd. Doubt crept in. But Keene wasn't done. His finger twitched against the trigger, his rage boiling over. "You keep talking like that, and the only place you're going is the morgue." The lot fell silent. The bystanders stopped whispering, stopped moving, their phones trembling, as they realized this wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was life or death, right here, right now. Marcus felt his chest tighten, breath catching in his throat. In that instant, every choice, every sacrifice he had made as a soldier, as a man, as a son, it all funneled into one fragile truth. He might not walk away from this night. And yet, even as the barrel of the gun hovered over him, he refused to break. He stared straight at Keene, eyes steady, voice barely above a whisper. "If this is how it ends, the world will know why." The silence after Marcus's last words was suffocating, the kind of silence that weighed heavier than the shouts before it. The crowd waited, breath held, cameras fixed. Even Doyle hesitated, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But Keene didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, slamming his free hand against Marcus's chest, shoving him back into the seat. The pistol never wavered from its place, but now the violence wasn't just in the threat. It was in the touch. "Out of the car!" Keene roared. Marcus gasped, the air knocked from his lungs. His instincts screamed to resist, to push back, to defend himself as he would against any attack. But another voice inside, sharper, colder, screamed louder. Don't give them what they want. Don't let them write this as your crime." He forced his arms to remain outstretched, fingers trembling in the night air. "I'm not resisting," he shouted, his voice cracking for the first time. "I'm not resisting." But Keene didn't hear, or chose not to. He yanked harder at Marcus's uniform, tugging at the collar that bore the insignia of his rank. The golden bars glinted in the neon light, catching the eyes of the bystanders. One of them cried out, "He's a lieutenant! Look at his uniform!" But Keene only spat back. "That uniform doesn't mean a damn thing to me." And with that, he ripped at the fabric, tearing the collar slightly. The sound of threads snapping like a cruel metaphor. Marcus's chest burned. Not just from the shove, but from the humiliation. His uniform wasn't just clothing. It was years of sacrifice, of discipline, of loyalty to a flag that now fluttered far from his protection. To see it disrespected this way wasn't just painful. It was soul-crushing. Doyle finally acted, grabbing Marcus's arm roughly. "Stop resisting!" he shouted again, louder this time, as if repeating it would make it true. He twisted Marcus's wrist, forcing it behind his back, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch of aggression. The crowd erupted. "He's not resisting! We're watching everything! You can't do this!" But the officers seemed deaf to it all, lost in their own narrative, their own performance of control. Marcus gritted his teeth, his voice rising above the chaos. "I am complying! I am complying!" His words were desperate but clear, a plea to the world, to the cameras, to history itself. "See me. Hear me. Don't let them erase this truth." Keene pressed harder, his face inches from Marcus, his spit hot against the lieutenant's cheek. "Complying? No. You're just lucky I haven't pulled this trigger yet." The cruelty wasn't hidden anymore. It was raw, naked, undeniable. And as the crowd gasped and shouted, Marcus realized they weren't just trying to arrest him. They were trying to strip him of dignity, of identity, of humanity itself. The crowd's voices grew louder, a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. Dozens of phones now hovered in the air, their small red recording lights piercing the night. But none of that stopped the assault. Doyle wrenched Marcus's arm back further, the strain sending jolts of pain through his shoulder. Marcus winced, his jaw clenching, but he didn't fight. Every fiber of training told him to endure, to survive. "Stop resisting!" Doyle shouted again, the lie ringing hollow. He forced Marcus sideways, halfway out of the car. Keene leaned in, grabbed Marcus by the chest strap of his uniform, and yanked. The fabric tore again, this time louder, threads snapping under the violence of his grip. The sight of it, his decorated service uniform being shredded like cheap cloth, broke something deep inside Marcus. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. One woman screamed, "That's the U.S. Army uniform! You can't treat him like this!" Keene sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Uniform or not, he's nothing but trouble. Just another problem that needs handling." Marcus felt the sting of those words sharper than the pain in his arm. For years he had worn that uniform proudly, believing it was armor, not just against bullets, but against prejudice, believing it was proof that he had earned his place in this country. But in that moment, under Keene's grip, he realized, to men like this, the uniform was invisible. His service meant nothing. His sacrifice meant nothing. All they saw was his skin. Marcus' voice cracked, the weight of the moment heavy in his chest. "This uniform, it stands for sacrifice, for honor. You don't get to tear that away from me." Keene laughed, cruel and mocking. "Honor? You think you've got honor? You're sitting here begging me not to shoot. Where's the honor in that? The words burned. But Marcus didn't reply. He couldn't waste his breath trying to reason with hate. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the crowd, locking eyes with the woman holding her phone steady despite her trembling hands. "Keep recording," he said hoarsely, loud enough for them to hear. "The truth matters. It has to." That single plea, those few words, shifted the crowd. They weren't just witnesses anymore. They were guardians of his story. A man at the back shouted, "We're with you, Lieutenant. They won't bury this." Another added, "Stay strong." For the first time that night, Marcus felt a flicker of strength return. They could strip his uniform, they could twist his arms, they could spit venom into his face, but they couldn't erase the truth if it was seen, if it was remembered. Keene slammed him against the SUV one more time, fury rising. "Shut your mouth! You don't get to speak!" But Marcus had already spoken, and his words now lived in every recording, every heart in that lot. They could humiliate him, but they could not silence him. The assault was no longer quiet, no longer hidden. Marcus' body jerked under the force of Keene's grip, his shoulders straining as Doyle twisted his arm. The torn edges of his uniform flapped in the night breeze, a painful symbol of everything being stripped away from him. And then the crowd broke. "No, this is wrong," a man shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. He stepped forward, pointing directly at Keene. "We're all watching. You can't hide this." Another voice joined in, louder, angrier. "He's a soldier. He fought for this country, and you treat him like a criminal?" Phones rose higher, capturing every angle. The glow of the screens lit the crowd like a wall of witnesses. Their voices, once whispers, now roared in unison. "Ted, let him go. Stop resisting. He's not even moving. Shame on you." For the first time, Marcus felt the tide shift. The fear in his chest was still there, pounding with every breath, but the outrage swelling around him became a strange kind of shield. He wasn't alone anymore. Keene snapped his head toward the crowd, eyes blazing. "Back off!" he bellowed. His gun swung slightly in their direction, a chilling reminder of his willingness to escalate. Gasps rippled. Some of the bystanders stepped back, their courage colliding with fear, but others held firm. "You gonna shoot us too?" A young woman shouted, her phone steady. "Go ahead, we're live streaming this." The mention of live sent a visible flicker through Doyle. His grip faltered for just a second as the realization dawned. This wasn't just a local scene anymore. This was public. This was spreading. Marcus seized that moment, not with violence, but with his voice. "Everyone, please stay calm. Don't give them a reason. Just keep filming." His tone was urgent but controlled, a soldier's command cloaked in desperate humanity. The crowd obeyed. They didn't rush forward, didn't escalate, but their voices grew steadier, stronger. It wasn't chaos, it was solidarity. One man lifted his phone higher and declared, "The world's gonna see this, Lieutenant. They can't erase it." Marcus's throat tightened. That word, lieutenant, rang out like a lifeline. His rank, his dignity, a reminder that despite everything, he wasn't just another black man in a parking lot. He was someone who had given his life to service, someone whose story mattered. Keene, furious at losing control of the narrative, slammed Marcus harder against the SUV. "Shut him up," he barked at Doyle. "Shut them all up." But the crowd wouldn't be silenced. Their outrage had reached a boiling point, their voices crashing over the night like waves against a breaking wall. For the first time, Keene wasn't just fighting Marcus. He was fighting the truth. And the truth was winning. The parking lot was alive with voices now, a storm of outrage, disbelief, and fear. The glow of cell phones turned the witnesses into a wall of light, each one recording, each one refusing to look away. Marcus, pinned against the SUV, felt the cold metal bite into his back, his arms twisted painfully, his uniform torn, his dignity hanging by a thread. But the voices of the crowd gave him strength he didn't know he had left. "Stay strong, Lieutenant," someone yelled. "We're with you," cried another. Their support was fire in his veins. even as Keene pressed harder against him. Keene's fury boiled over. His voice shook with rage. "You think this crowd's gonna save you? You think these cameras scare me?" He shoved Marcus again, harder this time. "I'll end this right now." Gasps ripped through the crowd. A woman screamed. Doyle, still gripping Marcus's arm, hesitated. His eyes darted nervously between the phones, the crowd, and the gun in Keene's hand. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His lips parted as if to say something, but fear choked him silent. Marcus, through the pain, locked eyes with Keene. His voice was low but powerful, steady despite the chaos. "If you do this, the world will know. They will see you, not me, for what you are." The words struck harder than any shove. For the first time, Keene faltered. His jaw tightened, his nostrils flared, but his hands shook. Just barely, but enough for the crowd to see. "Put the gun down," someone shouted. "You're on camera," another screamed. "Everyone's watching." The chant grew louder and louder, until it drowned out even Keene's rage. The crowd wasn't just filming anymore. They were demanding justice. Their collective voice became a weapon, sharper than bullets, more powerful than threats. Doyle's grip loosened further. His eyes betrayed him. Doubt, guilt, fear. He finally muttered under his breath, almost too low to hear. "Keene, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Keene snapped, his authority crumbling under the weight of dozens of lenses. He turned his gun toward Marcus again, finger twitching on the trigger. And then it happened. Marcus's voice rose, not in a shout, but in a declaration that silenced the crowd. "I will not resist. I will not fight. But I will not bow to hate." The words carried, echoing off the gas station walls, reverberating through the night. The crowd erupted, not in panic this time, but in defiance. "Let him go! Justice for the lieutenant! Hands off!" The officers were no longer in control. The power had shifted. The tipping point had arrived. Keene's finger hovered, trembling on the trigger, as the roar of the people swallowed him whole. And Marcus, though bruised and battered, stood taller than both of them. The night was alive with the roar of voices, the crackling tension between fear and outrage. Marcus stood in the storm, torn uniform clinging to his chest, his body aching from the assault. And yet somehow he felt taller. The crowd's chants pounded like drums. "Justice for the lieutenant! Hands off! We're live! We're live!" It was no longer a confrontation between one man and two officers. It was a confrontation between truth and lies, between dignity and hate, and the truth had cameras on its side. A teenager in the crowd, her hands steady despite her shaking, spoke directly into her live stream. "This is happening right now in Virginia. A Black Army officer in uniform being attacked by cops. Share this. Everyone needs to see." Her words spread faster than fire. Within minutes, the video was shared, retweeted, reposted. Notifications buzzed in pockets across the country. Phones lighting up in living rooms, dorms, cafes, newsrooms. From the crowd, someone shouted, "It's already got 1,000 viewers." Then another, 10,000. Marcus couldn't see the numbers, but he could feel it. The weight of unseen eyes, millions of them. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was standing before the world. Keene noticed too. The more the crowd chanted, the more the phones glowed, the tighter his grip on the gun became. His voice cracked as he barked, "Shut those cameras off! This is a police matter!" But no one listened. They only shouted louder. "Police matter? This is an abuse of power! You can't stop the truth! The world is watching." Doyle, his face pale, finally muttered again, "Keene, it's over. We can't—" Keene snapped his head toward him, veins bulging. "Don't you dare!" His rage was spiraling, his authority collapsing under the weight of exposure. For Marcus, the realization was surreal. Hours earlier, he had been just another soldier finishing his day, proud of his new SUV. Now the same vehicle was lit by flashing phones, transformed into the stage for a moment of reckoning. "Bethina," he whispered to himself, almost as if reminding his own spirit, "Hold steady. The world is watching." The irony wasn't lost on him. He had trained for wars overseas, but here he was, fighting for his dignity in the country he swore to defend. And every scream, every camera, every chant reminded him that this wasn't just his fight, it was everyone's fight. Somewhere in the crowd, a voice rose above the rest. "This isn't just about him. This is about all of us." The crowd roared in agreement. Their voices became thunder, shaking the night. And at that moment, Marcus knew this story would not stay buried in a parking lot. It had already outgrown Virginia. It was racing across the nation, across the world. And there was no turning back. Keen's face twisted with rage, but behind his fury was something new: fear. The chants of the crowd pressed down on him like a tidal wave, the glow of dozens of cameras blinding him more than any spotlight. His voice, once booming with unchecked authority, now cracked under the weight of exposure. "Back away, all of you," he barked, his gun trembling in his hand. "This is a police operation, and you're interfering with justice." But no one moved. If anything, the crowd pressed closer. The wall of voices grew louder, echoing through the parking lot, bouncing off buildings, carrying far beyond the scene. Doyle shifted uneasily, still holding Marcus's arm, but with far less conviction. His grip slackened more with every chant. Sweat rolled down his temple, his lips muttering fragments of sentences he couldn't finish. "Keen, this doesn't look good. It's already viral. We should—" "Shut your mouth," Keen snapped, whipping his head around so fast it nearly pulled Doyle into his orbit. His eyes burned with desperation. "You think I'm going down for this? You think I'm gonna let some punk soldier and a bunch of phone-waving nobodies ruin me?" Marcus felt Keen's spit land on his cheek, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he met the man's fury with a calm that felt both terrifying and liberating. "It's too late, officer. They've already seen who you are. You can't hide anymore." Those words cut deeper than any shove. Keen's face flushed red, his chest heaving. His gun hand shook more noticeably now, betraying his unraveling grip on control. The crowd sensed it. "You're finished," someone yelled. "Resign now," another shouted. "Hands off the lieutenant." Phones rose higher, and one man yelled into his live stream, "If anything happens to him, the world will know who pulled the trigger. This man's name is Officer Keen. Remember it." The name pierced the night, echoing in ways Keen couldn't contain. His anonymity was gone. His mask of power was cracking in real time. Doyle swallowed hard, his moral conflict playing out across his face. His hands slipped entirely from Marcus's arm. "This isn't right," he whispered. Louder this time. "We need to stop." For the first time, Marcus felt the pressure lift slightly. His arm was free, though his body still ached from the abuse. He stood straighter, squaring his shoulders, his torn uniform still commanding respect. Keen snarled, pointing the gun not just at Marcus, but at the crowd now. "You all think you're brave? You think these cameras make you safe? Keep testing me." The crowd gasped, but no one backed down. Instead, the chanting grew louder, stronger, almost rhythmic. "Hands off! Hands off! Hands off!" Keen's desperation was now plain for everyone to see. He wasn't the man in control anymore. He was the one cornered, trapped in the cage of his own rage, surrounded by truth he couldn't silence. And Marcus, though bruised and battered, stood taller still. The chants thundered like waves, crashing over the chaos. The crowd was no longer just a collection of witnesses. They were an army of voices, unyielding and fierce. And in the middle of it all, Marcus stood bruised, aching, but unbroken. For too long he had been silent, forced into submission by threats, by violence, by the cold barrel of a gun. But now, surrounded by people demanding justice, he felt a surge of strength rise within him, something deeper than muscle, stronger than fear. He lifted his head, his voice carrying above the chants. "Listen to me!" The crowd quieted just enough to hear him. Even the cameras seemed to lean closer. Keen sneered, his gun still aimed, but Marcus pressed on. I am a lieutenant in the United States Army. I swore an oath to serve and protect this country. And tonight, in my own uniform, I was treated as less than a man because of the color of my skin. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Doyle froze, his guilty eyes darting between Marcus and the phones. Marcus's voice grew stronger, steady as a commander, addressing his troops. This is not just about me. This is about every man, every woman who has ever been humiliated, threatened, or broken down because of the uniform of their skin. This ends tonight. The crowd erupted in cheers. The chant shifted. Stand strong! Stand strong! Keen's face twisted, veins bulging. Shut your mouth, soldier, he barked, his voice nearly cracking. But Marcus didn't flinch. He had faced worse on battlefields. He would not bow here. You point a gun at me because you think it makes you powerful, Marcus said, his gaze locked on Keen. But the truth is, your power is gone. They see you now. The world sees you. The words were daggers. Keen's hand trembled, the gun twitching as though it weighed 1,000 pounds. He tried to bark back, but the crowd cut him off with deafening chants. World sees you. World sees you. Phones streamed live, comments flooding in from unseen millions. The footage wasn't just capturing an incident. It was capturing history. Doyle, now fully broken away, took a step back, his hands half raised as though to distance himself from the chaos. His voice cracked. Keen, let it go. You've already lost. Marcus, breathing hard but unyielding, stared down the barrel pointed at his chest. His voice dropped, calm and resolute. Pull the trigger if you must, but know this. If you do, you'll never silence the truth. You'll never erase what they've seen tonight. The crowd roared. Phones shook in the air. Keen's authority shattered with every second. And for the first time since the nightmare began, Marcus wasn't just surviving. He was leading. The air in the parking lot felt electric, charged with the energy of 1,000 voices condensed into one. The chants shook the night. Phones lit the scene like floodlights, and Keen's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger. Every eye was locked on that gun, every breath held. Marcus stood tall, his chest rising and falling, his voice calm despite the chaos swirling around him. You've already lost, Keen. The world doesn't fear you. They see you. The crowd echoed. They see you. They see you. Keen's jaw clenched so tight his teeth ground audibly. He looked around, realizing the faces weren't afraid of him anymore. They weren't shrinking back. They were defying him. His badge no longer made him untouchable. His gun no longer made him unstoppable. For the first time, he was the one cornered. Drop the weapon, Keen! Someone from the crowd yelled. You're done! Another screamed. Even Doyle, who had been silent too long, found his voice. He stepped closer, trembling but resolute. He's right, Keen. This isn't power. This is madness. Put it down before you destroy everything. Keen spun toward him, fury in his eyes. Don't you dare betray me. But Doyle didn't back away. For once, his voice didn't shake. No, I'm done. The crowd erupted in cheers at Doyle's defiance. Phones zoomed in on his face, capturing the shift, the crack in the blue wall of silence. Keen's entire body trembled now, torn between rage and collapse. His gun wavered between Marcus, the crowd, and Doyle. His authority was gone, and all he had left was the illusion of control hanging by the trigger of his weapon. Marcus locked eyes with him, unblinking. His voice was low, steady, commanding. Put the gun down. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the crowd hushed, as if the whole world held its breath in that single second. Keen's hand twitched. His nostrils flared. His knuckles whitened around the grip. For a terrifying heartbeat, it seemed the nightmare would end in a flash of violence. And then Doyle lunged. His hand smacked Keen's wrists, forcing the gun downward. The weapon clattered onto the pavement, the metallic clang echoing like a gunshot itself. Gasps ripped through the crowd. Phones captured every angle as Keene stumbled backward, his face pale with disbelief. The chants exploded into thunderous cheers. "Drop the gun! Drop the gun! He's finished!" Keene, breathless, broken, looked around at the sea of defiance, at the soldier who still stood tall before him, at the partner who had just turned against him. And for the first time he realized he wasn't feared anymore. He was exposed. The metallic clang of Keene's gun hitting the pavement still echoed in the air when the world seemed to pause. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The parking lot was suspended in silence, broken only by the faint hum of a distant car passing on the highway. Marcus's chest rose and fell, each breath sharp, painful, but filled with relief. His body ached from the abuse, but his spirit, his dignity, remained unbroken. He bent slowly, deliberately, and lifted his hat from the ground. Straightening his torn uniform, he placed it back on his head. It wasn't just a gesture. It was reclamation. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, tears, an outpouring of emotion that swept across the gas station like a tidal wave. People shouted his name, his rank. Others chanted, "Justice! Justice!" The sound was no longer anger alone. It was triumph. Doyle stood frozen, his chest heaving. His hands still trembled from disarming Keene. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, for the first time. Shame carved deep lines into his face. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Lieutenant, I'm sorry." Marcus turned his gaze toward him, steady and unreadable. He didn't answer. Sometimes silence speaks louder than forgiveness. Keene, however, was not silent. He stumbled backward, his face drained of color, his chest rising in panicked gasps. He looked at the crowd, the cameras, the world closing in on him. You don't understand," he stammered. He resisted, but his excuses fell flat against the roar of truth. No one believed him. Every word was drowned out by the undeniable evidence recorded from dozens of angles. His power had evaporated. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low but commanding, carrying effortlessly over the noise. "This uniform I wear, it means something, and tonight they tried to strip it away. But understand this, dignity is not theirs to take, not mine, not anyone's." The crowd roared in agreement, their voices carrying his words into the night sky. Phones captured the moment, his torn uniform, his unyielding stance, the broken officers beside him. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Backup was arriving, but not as saviors. Tonight they were arriving at a scene already judged by the people, already broadcast to the world. As the flashing lights neared, Marcus stood still, shoulders squared. He wasn't running, he wasn't hiding. He was standing proud, scarred, but undefeated. And in that silence between the past and what came next, he realized something profound. Tonight wasn't just his story. It was the story of a nation. By the next morning, the video had circled the globe. Clips of Marcus standing tall in his torn uniform aired on every news channel. Social media feeds flooded with hashtags, #justice, for the lieutenant, #hands off our heroes, #they see you. The footage wasn't just trending, it was unavoidable. News anchors replayed the moment Keene's gun clattered to the pavement, slow-motion loops dissecting every twitch of his hand, every word Marcus spoke. Headlines screamed across screens. Army officer assaulted in uniform by police. Talk shows debated the meaning of it all. Some called it a breaking point, proof of a system too broken to ignore. Others tried to deflect, to soften the truth. But the raw video left little room for doubt. The world had seen what happened. In living rooms across the country, veterans sat stunned, fists clenched, anger boiling. "That man wore the uniform," one said on camera, his voice shaking. "That uniform deserves respect, and they tore it off him like it meant nothing." Civil rights leaders echoed the sentiment. If even a soldier, decorated and disciplined, is not safe in his skin, one leader declared to a crowd of thousands, then none of us are safe. This is not an isolated incident. This is America's reflection. Outside Keene's precinct, protesters gathered by the hundreds, then thousands. They carried signs with Marcus's image, with his words, "Dignity is not theirs to take." The chants mirrored the night of the confrontation, only louder, fiercer, unstoppable. Keene's name became infamous overnight. His face, captured in every live stream, was replayed endlessly. No press conference could spin the truth. His badge no longer shielded him. It exposed him. Calls for his firing, for his arrest, thundered louder each day. Doyle's role was murkier. Some condemned his silence, his complicity in the violence. Others pointed to his last-minute defiance, arguing it showed there was still hope for change within the ranks. Either way, his career was finished. And Marcus? He became more than a victim. His calm defiance, his refusal to bow, turned him into a symbol. Talk shows called him the soldier who stood tall. Newspapers ran front-page photos of him, adjusting his hat with shredded sleeves and a steady gaze. But Marcus never saw himself as a hero. When reporters crowded him outside his home days later, microphones in his face, he simply said, "I didn't stand for myself. I stood for everyone who couldn't." The cameras flashed, the world listened. His words weren't rehearsed. They were truth, and truth, once seen, could not be unseen. The fallout had begun, but the reckoning was only getting started. Months later, the nation's eyes once again fixed on Virginia. This time, not on a gas station parking lot, but on a courtroom packed wall-to-wall with reporters, protesters outside chanting Marcus's words, "Dignity is not theirs to take." Officer Keene sat at the defendant's table, stripped of his badge, his face pale and hardened. Gone was the bravado, the swagger. Now, under the bright courtroom lights, he looked small, diminished by the weight of his own actions. Doyle sat a few feet away, called to testify against his former partner. His hands shook, his voice cracked, but his words carried weight. "It wasn't just wrong," he admitted. "It was cruelty, and I let it happen too long." The crowd murmured. Reporters scribbled furiously. Doyle's confession wasn't just an indictment of Keene, it was an indictment of silence, complicity, the culture that allowed abuse to fester. Then came Marcus. The room stilled as he walked to the stand. His uniform was pressed sharp, medals gleaming on his chest. He carried himself with the discipline of a soldier, but his eyes revealed the scars of that night. He swore in, sat down, and faced the jury. "What happened to you that night, Lieutenant Ellison?" the prosecutor asked. Marcus took a deep breath. His voice was calm, steady, but heavy with truth. "That night I was not seen as an officer. I was not seen as a man. I was seen only as black. And for that, I was humiliated, threatened, and nearly killed. Not by enemies overseas, but by officers sworn to protect me here at home." The jury shifted uneasily. Some wiped at their eyes. "Did you resist arrest?" the prosecutor pressed. Marcus shook his head. "No, I did everything in my power to stay calm, to follow orders. But no amount of obedience could protect me from the hate in that man's eyes." All eyes turned to Keene, who sat rigid, jaw tight, refusing to look up. The defense tried to spin, to question Marcus's memory, his actions. But every attempt fell flat against the mountain of evidence. The live streams, the bystanders' testimonies, the viral footage replayed frame by frame on the courtroom screens. When the prosecutor rested, Marcus leaned forward, his final words cutting through the silence. "If this can happen to me, in uniform, what chance does a young black teenager have on an empty street? This is bigger than me. It always was." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, reporters scrambling to capture every word. The judge struck the gavel, calling for order, but the truth was already out. The trial wasn't just about Keene anymore. It was about every uniform, every badge, every life scarred by systemic abuse. And Marcus had made sure the world couldn't look away. The trial ended with a verdict the world was waiting for. Officer Keene was found guilty. Assault, misconduct, abuse of authority. The gavel struck, and the courtroom buzzed with relief. Some wept, others cheered. Outside, the chants of protesters rose into celebration. Justice had not erased the pain, but it had sent a message. Impunity was no longer guaranteed. But the story didn't end with a sentence. It began with a movement. Marcus never asked to be a symbol, yet everywhere he went, people recognized him, the soldier who stood tall in his torn uniform. Churches invited him to speak. Schools asked him to tell his story to young students. Civil rights organizations called on him to stand with them. His words from that night, "Dignity is not theirs to take," were painted on murals, printed on banners, carried on posters at rallies across the nation. Our change was slow, uneven, often resisted. But it was real. Police departments announced new training, new accountability measures. Lawmakers debated reforms with Marcus's name invoked as proof of why they were needed. His testimony replayed not just in the courtroom, but in congressional hearings, on news programs, in classrooms studying justice. And yet, Marcus himself remained humble. When reporters asked how it felt to become the face of a movement, he always answered the same. "This was never just my story. This was about all of us. I just happened to be the one standing there when the cameras turned on." In private, he wrestled with the scars. Nightmares sometimes dragged him back to that gas station parking lot, to the cold steel of the gun against his chest. But whenever doubt crept in, he remembered the voices, the chants, the cheers, the solidarity of strangers who refused to let him stand alone. That memory carried him through. Years later, at a memorial dedicated to victims of racial injustice, Marcus stood before a crowd, now a decorated officer, his uniform spotless, his voice steady. Behind him, carved into stone, were the words he once spoke in defiance. "Dignity is not theirs to take." He looked out at the crowd, black, white, young, old, all gathered together, and he smiled. "That night," he said softly, "they tried to strip me of everything. But what they didn't know was that when one man stands tall, others rise with him. And when others rise, no force on earth can silence the truth." The crowd erupted in applause, the sound carrying into the sky like a promise. The story of Lieutenant Marcus Ellison was no longer just a story of pain. It was a story of resistance, of solidarity, of a nation forced to look at itself in the mirror and begin, however slowly, to change. And long after the night ended, his stand lived on.